Nakamura and Carlsen have faced each other countless times, and usually it's Carlsen who comes out on top. But in this game, Nakamura turned the tables and outplayed world number one in style, showing that even Magnus Carlsen can be beaten. So let's look at this game where Carlsen was white and Nakamura was black. So Carlsen started with c4, the English opening. Nakamura played e5, reverse Sicilian, g3, knight f6, bishop g2. Now there are quite a few moves in this position. So one of them being d5 and also another one that Nakamura played c6. So basically he wants to play d5, and if the capture happens, then he wants to capture with the pawn. So he will have two pawns in the center, strong center. So in this position, Carlsen of course is not going to allow Nakamura to have control of the center so easily. So he plays the move d4, bringing his own pawn in the center. So after e takes d4, there is queen takes d4. Now, it's really important to note that Carlsen would not have played this d4 idea if c6 had not been played, because in that case, this knight would be able to get out with tempo. So, but he takes advantage of this pawn on c6 because now the queen cannot be that easily attacked. And even if c5 is played, the bishop would be restricted. This bishop would get active. This would become an outpost square. So it's not that great of an option for black. So Nakamura plays the move d5. Carlsen plays knight f3. Normal development move. Now, the c6 square is not there for the knight to develop. So then Nakamura plays the move knight a6. So his plan is to try to either go here and then do something, or knight c5, and then maybe he can try to shift the knight over here, or even keep it on c5. So let's try to reroute the knight through a6. Carlsen castles. Then Nakamura develops the bishop with a tempo, bishop c5, one of the other advantages of the knight being on a6. Then in this position, queen e5 check gets played. Then Nakamura plays queen e7. Carlsen plays c takes d5. So in this position, if c takes d5, then Nakamura is not a big fan of it, because he would not just get an isolated pawn, but then the queens would also get exchanged. And if he goes for knight takes d5, then yeah, this pawn might fall and create more issues. So he first exchanges the queens. And then in this position, he plays knight takes e5. So he's like, if you want to give me an isolated pawn, that's fine, but you'll need to give up that bishop. So Carlsen in this position replies with the move knight d3. He's putting pressure on this bishop, and knight takes c5 would give him the double bishop advantage. So Nakamura is like, no, my bishop is active. I'm not going to allow that exchange. So he plays the move bishop b6. So now in this position, Carlsen gives up that bishop. So the active bishop for the knight, because he's thinking that now Nakamura has gotten this isolated pawn, and he would be able to put pressure on that pawn. He would be able to win it and justify giving up his bishop for that knight. So quite a complex battle. So knight c3 gets played by Carlsen, developing the knight and attacking this pawn. Nakamura replies with bishop e6, developing the bishop, of course defending this pawn. Then knight a4. Once again, one of the advantages that Nakamura has is the double bishops. So he's not going to give it up so easily. So he plays the move bishop d8. See, if bishop c7 had been played, then there would be this bishop f4 with a tempo, again offering exchange of bishops. So Nakamura is like, all right, I'll put the bishop on d8, so at least the offer of exchange of that bishop won't be there for at least in the medium term. So then Carlsen plays the move bishop f4, bishop e7. Of course, that bishop was not going to remain on d8 for long. So bishop e7, stopping any of those bishop d6 ideas or knight c5 ideas as well. So then rook c1 gets played, then castle. Yes, this knight is not that greatly placed on a6, but currently it's doing a nice task of covering the square. So there is no rook c7 idea. So in this position, Carlsen plays the move bishop e5. He's centralizing the bishop. So and if f6 or something like that happens, he can bring it on d4, keeping an eye on the queen side as well. So but Nakamura is like, all right, the bishop is on e5. I can play f6 any moment I want. So I'm not in a rush to do that. Let me just bring my rook on the open file as well. So yeah, he didn't want only Carlsen to have that rook on the open file. Then Carlsen played the move knight f4 in this position. So just trying to increase some pressure. Although knight takes e6 is not a serious idea, because after f takes e6, the bishop it was not that active, so that would be gone, and this would not be an isolated pawn because there would be pawn on e6. So Carlsen is just trying to increase the pressure. He's not trying to get rid of that bishop actually. So then in this position, see, as I mentioned earlier, that knight on a6 was doing a really important task of stopping this rook c7 ideas. We don't want to allow the rook that is on the open file to get it on the 7th rank. So Nakamura played the move rook fc8, and then he recognizes that now the knight is not required to be on a6. So he improves that knight's position. He goes for the move knight b4. Maybe in some lines this could happen. Maybe in some lines he could play knight c6 and try to actually remove that centralized bishop of Carlsen. So then Carlsen plays the move knight c3. He's like, all right, my knight on a4 is also not doing much. Let me do something. So then Nakamura plays the move bishop g5. He's improving the bishop's position and keeping the pressure on Carlsen. Carlsen goes for the move bishop d6. Now the knight just comes back actually. It is more actively placed than it was on a6. Then Nakamura plays in this position, Carlsen plays the move rook d1 in this position, putting pressure on the pawn. So Nakamura is not worried. He plays the move bishop takes f4. Now some of you would be thinking that, wait, what is going on? Now Nakamura does not even have the double bishop advantage. That active bishop is also gone. Now he's left with this not so active bishop. What happened? How is he going to push for the advantage? So yes, of course, Carlsen has a bit more of a pleasant position because of this isolated pawn and also Nakamura's double bishop advantage having gone. But Nakamura is known for his energetic play, and he knows that in this position he needs to put pressure on Carlsen. Otherwise, Carlsen will slowly improve, and it will be one of those, just the slow play Carlsen, and then he would try to outplay Nakamura in the end game. So in this position, he goes for the move d4. A risky move because he is pushing this pawn, and this pawn gets on the dark square, and Carlsen has a dark square bishop. Already rook is there. Already the knight can put pressure. So if Nakamura is not careful, then he would get into trouble. But he knows that before Carlsen is able to put maximum pressure on it, he will be able to create activity. So Carlsen does not shy away from complications. He plays the move knight b5. So in this position, he should have actually played the move knight e4 and then maybe try to shift the knight over here, and it's a more pleasant position for him, but more on the equal side. So some of you would be thinking, but what's wrong with Carlsen's knight b5 move? So we'll see. And from here onwards, Nakamura slowly but steadily starts outplaying Carlsen. So first of all, he plays the move rook d8, of course, defending this pawn. So then in this position, rook d2 gets played by Carlsen, a very natural move because rook a d1 in this position is a threat to put pressure. So Nakamura is like, no worries, I'll play rook d7 in this position. So then in this position, Carlsen plays the move b3. So he's like, all right, after rook a d1, I might be able to put pressure, but then in some lines this pawn might be gone, so let me just defend it. So he plays the move b3. Then Nakamura plays the move rook a d8, improving the rook's position. Then Carlsen plays the move rook a d1. So far, it looks like things are looking good for white because, there is some pressure over here and all of these pieces are stuck in defending this pawn. And even if a3 is played, then the knight can also maneuver around. Even there can be some ideas of this exchange, and it just doesn't look like Carlsen is going to get into trouble. So, but what Nakamura does is something that we'll see. So, as I mentioned earlier, so a6 looks a bit tricky because there is knight c7, but Nakamura has seen more. The thing is that if knight c7 gets played in this position, then there is this move bishop h3. Now the knight is trapped. So earlier, once again, very important. See, he played a6 only when the rook was not on e8, because now a6, then there would be knight c7 and then there would be knight takes e6. So he's like, I'm going to play a6 only when knight c7 does not come with tempo. So then bishop can be moved and that knight will be trapped. So Carlsen, of course, played the move knight a3. Still, it looks like a fine position. What's wrong about his position? But then this is one of the strengths of Nakamura, the dynamic play. So he knows that he has a long-term positional weakness. His pieces, so these rook and the knight that is defending it, but he sensed a particular weakness in Carlsen's position. And then he played the move f6. So out of nowhere, he just found the way to trap Carlsen's bishop. He wants to play g5 in this position and trap his bishop. And now suddenly, It's not about attack of this pawn. It's not about the isolated pawn. It's about saving the bishop. Now, Carlsen recognized that, oh, this is a bit of a trouble. Now, let's say if we play, say, for example, rook d3, then just knight b4. Once the rook goes back, then there will be g5. So that won't work. Now, what if rook c2 gets played? Then also this. If this, then there is d3. The point in this position is that if he takes d3, then there can be rook takes d3 is there, but there can be knight d4 type of ideas. Bishop d5 is there, knight f3 is there, and suddenly that king side is looking weak. So Carlsen recognized that just moving the rook and then moving the bishop back won't be helpful. There will be those d3 type of ideas, and the center, the queen side, and the king side would get under pressure. So then Carlsen plays the move h4. Nakamura is like, all right, I'll play h6 and then continue with my idea of g5. Then Carlsen plays the move h5. But now it seems like, okay, g5 has been dealt with because of the en-passant. But then there is this very nice move, bishop g4, and now the h5 pawn lost. So Nakamura captures this, and then he slowly outplays Carlsen. So f3 gets played, and here Nakamura plays a really nice move, d3. So now he's exchanging these pieces because yes, Carlsen gets a pass pawn, but Nakamura has this pawn majority of 3 pawns versus 1 pawn, and then king f2 gets played, king e3. Now he tries to push the pawns. He's even improving the king's position. He's not even wary of going into the opposite color bishop endgame because he knows that because of the 3 versus 1, he will be able to make progress. And then that's what happens. King e6, king f5, plays king e5. He's threatening that maybe I might go there. Then b4, f5, then f4. Now he gets pass pawns on the king side. Then king f5. So he's planning to play king g4 and then push the h pawn. So now that in this position, so he's just playing bishop b5. He's trying to show that I can do something on the queen side as well, because if d4, then the king can try to get there actually. Then king e2 gets played, just king g4. Then king f2, because Carlsen recognized that he wants to do king g3, king g2, f3. So he can't allow Nakamura to do that. So he plays this, he gives up a pawn. But this is just worse. So bishop c6. So then king f5, then king e4, then just h3. Now, yeah, so Carlsen recognized that still it is just bad. Then king f3, the threat is to play this. Bishop f2 has h2 check idea. Then in this position, king h2 gets played. Then just bishop d7. Now king e3, he's planning to push this pawn. And the bishop c5 check. Then this, and then if king g1 also happens, he can sacrifice one of the pawns and then push the pawn. And then this is just lost. And then Carlsen resigns. So a really nice example of Nakamura of dynamic play, how he sensed that it was not that isolated pawn of his, but that bishop of Carlsen that became the problem, and then he took advantage of it and then won the game in the convincing manner. Thanks everyone for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.